Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our city council meeting tonight. Tonight's invocation will be given by Pastor Marlon Height. Thank you. Kingsburg Community Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
City Council, I want to thank you for the privilege to come and open in prayer and know that many people are praying for you, for your position to serve the community isn't taken lightly. If you're going to serve, you know it takes sacrifice and time and energy and sometimes make difficult decisions. So thank you, and I want to lead us in prayer for that. Lord, thank you for your goodness and your love, and tonight this privilege to be here. I put in front of each council member a little coin, and on it says grace, and it's an acrostic for God's riches at Christ's expense. And so, Lord Jesus, thank you for making a sacrifice for each and every one of us. Thank you, Lord, for your grace that will guide us and show us how to respond to people, sometimes in the heat of the moment. And just thank you for your example and your love that calls us to go beyond and to become all that you want us to be. Tonight I lift up our council. Thank you for the many things happening in our community. And Lord, many of those we can rejoice in. Some of the things are difficult, and we, again, thank you that we can turn to you, and you are there, and you offer us comfort and perspective and hope and peace. So for all this tonight, Lord, we're so grateful. Ask your blessing upon the meeting, upon each person who has come to share or be a part of it in some way. And Lord, for all of it, that you would receive the honor and the glory and the praise, both now and forever. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Marlon. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. Today's February 19th, 2025. First we need to approve our agenda. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Roll call.
Councilmember Sylvan?
Present.
Councilmember North?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Palomar?
Here. Okay, now we can approve our agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion. Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have presentations. Tonight we have one. CERT member swearing in. Presentation by Fire Chief Rodney Roberts.
Thank you, Council, for having us here tonight. It's my pleasure to have the CERT team here. We have a lot of supporting members. As you can see behind us, we're going to be swearing in 7 new members, and we have another class coming up here shortly. They've completed 9 modules so far, put in many, many hours of things to help us out when we have a disaster here in Kingsburg or in the surrounding communities. They were this team here wasn't activated during the fires down south, but a lot of CERT teams were activated and helped out with that effort. And so to see that we have one of the 4 teams in the Central Valley, it's a great pleasure to have them here and to know that we have people that we can rely on from the community. They have training, and they come out and they're helping out with the community events that we have here in Kingsburg, and just that organization and knowing that we could call on them when we have that need. So tonight we're going to swear them in, and it's my pleasure to have Abigail have them come up.
Welcome.
Go ahead and raise your right hand. You're going to repeat after me. I, do solemnly
So Chief Roberts, I have a question. How many residents do we have on the CERT team now? With these new ones
I
added?
believe we have 26 right now.
26,
Yes.
okay.
So
Great.
and we have some more that we're getting trained up, but as you know, it's disasters could happen at any time, and you don't know the obligations that they have. And so having that many members will allow us to have people readily available with that training. And so Rolinda's done a great job, getting them trained and working on some new grants and realigning some new grants. And we're looking at a trailer and some storage and all the other things that come with it, and getting them the gear that they need to help us respond. So, it's coming along pretty well. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's great. We hope we don't have any disasters here in Kingsburg, but I'm glad we have they're well trained, and we have a CERT team just in case, something ever happens. So thank you, Chief. Okay, moving on our agenda, we have public comment. Public comment provides an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest to the public within the council's jurisdiction and which are not already on the agenda this evening. It is the policy of the council not to answer questions impromptu. Speakers should limit their comments to not more than 3 minutes. For items which are on the agenda this evening, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to address the council as each item is brought up for discussion. Do we have anybody in our council chambers that would like to address the City Council on anything not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Next, we have consent calendar. Tonight we have items 1 through 5. Do we have anybody from council that would like to pull an item off consent calendar? No. Anybody from the staff, or from the public would like to pull an item from consent calendar? No? Okay. Then can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Motion carries. Thank you. Consent calendar. We'll move on to item number 6, regular calendar. Swedish Festival Committee request for sponsorship. Presentation by Swedish Festival Committee member Steve Safarjan. Come on up, Steve.
My name's Steve Safarjan. I'm not a resident of Kingsburg. However, I do have a business here in town. Thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. You received something in your packets that talks a little bit about, reiterates your vision of Kingsburg and wanting to celebrate the past, engage in the present, and build on future full of possibilities. And we feel like the Swedish Festival does a lot of that. We branded ourselves as a Swedish community. We separated ourselves from other communities in this in the valley as being, just a highlight at the. I believe it's been called the Gem of the Valley, and I believe that us having a Swedish festival and us honoring our Swedish heritage helps separate us apart and helps make us one of those gems of the valley, or the gem of the valley. The reason I'm asking the city to sponsor, be the main sponsor for the Swedish Cultural Village, I listed several things that we need help with the Cultural Village, but part of that is education too. I lived in this town 71 years. I didn't know, somebody asked me about the dollar horses in town. I didn't even realize the dollar horses in Scandinavian countries stand for strength, faithfulness, wisdom, and dignity. Well, I had to look that up, and I think it's part of our responsibility to actually teach people this or have that opportunity for they can learn. And they can learn at the Cultural Village. We've had a Cultural Village as long as I can remember at the Swedish Festival, but I want to take, I think the committee wants to take it one step further and to give a little education about Kingsburg, about some of the Swedish traditions and about what makes us different from, other communities by honoring those traditions. I also think it's important that we not forget that we're a melting pot even here in Kingsburg. And even though we celebrate the Swedish tradition, there's other traditions that we do celebrate and we do honor. But this day, the Swedish Festival Day and the Swedish Cultural Village is something that we can teach people about. We can teach people about Kingsburg. We can teach people about some of the traditions, some of the things that are happening in Kingsburg year-round, actually, in this cultural village. So I'm asking the City Council for a $5,000 ongoing grant or donation to sponsor, be the only sponsor of the Swedish Cultural Village. And so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
I don't have any questions. I have comments when it's time for us to talk about that, but I don't have any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments from the public? No, then I'll bring it back to council. Go ahead, Laura.
I think that this goes right with our strategic plan on, I always get it wrong, Kingsburg experience. What is? Enhancing the Kingsburg experience. And I was really thinking about this after our last Swedish festival, because I know like the team works so hard in pulling this off, and it is what makes us stand out. It makes Kingsburg stand out. And the Swedish festival is the biggest thing we do for our heritage and what we have branded our town on. And I was really thinking about the cultural village, and a lot of that is, like I see it's on June. June does a lot. And I had concerns after the last Swedish festival, thinking that there's going to be a point when June can't do that anymore. And then what happens? And so I think that, I mean, I had thought back then it would be a good thing for council to give money to the chamber, to the Swedish Festival Committee, to make sure that that's something that never goes away in the Swedish Festival. You'll see a lot of other vendors that are not Swedish, right? But I think that the heart right down here in the middle, that is super important. And so I would like to see us do it, and for it to be an ongoing thing that that as a city that we do, to make sure that that continues and that money is not an obstacle.
Okay, if I may comment, and as you're all aware, I'm very active on the Swedish Festival Committee. My mom is the chairman. I really would appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate to the community just how much we are invested, that we could be labeled, that the council, that the city of Kingsburg could be labeled as sponsoring the cultural village. I think that would be a good message to be sending out to the community, because it lines up with our goals and our vision statement. So I would appreciate the opportunity to do this. I mean, I like the opportunity to enhance the cultural village, to put, it's, we've had years where we've kind of scrambled to get the funds, and it would help the committee to know that we have this available, that we can make these improvements, that we have some wiggle room for enhancing it and making it better for the community.
Yeah, I think the enhance word is a big one for me. So I like that word. And this, to me, being fiscally responsible, I mean, we already support the chamber, right? And the chamber puts on this event. But this is enhancing that experience, and it's almost like a value add, right? It looks like you're adding additional items to the cultural village and making it more of a robust part of the tradition here in Kingsburg, and so I appreciate that. The committee is doing that, so, yeah, I like the project.
Yeah, I think anything the council can do to help the Swedish Festival, this isn't a real big ask, and I think all of us are totally in favor of it. The Swedish Festival, I have so many great memories being here my whole life, and I'm sure everybody on this council does, that's been a part of the Swedish Festival year to year, and, I want to keep it for future generations where, my grandkids can say, yeah, the Swedish Festival, I remember, great memories from there also, the parades and just the festival and the games they play and stuff. So I think this is a great thing for our council to do. Like Stacy said, it shows that the council is got more input for the council, for the Swedish Festival. So then just give it to the chamber now. Yeah, so that's great. Thanks for bringing this, Stacy, to this. You sponsored this, so that's great. Thank you.
I have a question, Stacy. I thought the ask was going to be more. Is that enough?
If I can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is my 40th year of being on the Swedish Festival Committee, and no, there's never enough, and we can always use more. We had a sponsor last year for the Cultural Village, and we were able to replace some of the infrastructure and some of that thing. Can we use all of this 5,000 and probably more? Yes, but I also feel like the 40 years that I've been on this committee, the city of Kingsburg has been a tremendous support that some of you may not even be aware of. Public Works and the amount of time and effort that City Hall puts into assisting the committee and the chamber in putting this on is an expense. I realize it's an expense, and so yes, who knows? I may be here next year asking for more money because we will have other enhancements we want to do to it. But I think this year this would be a big help, and we can do some of the things we want to. And some of the things are printed material and education and doing some things with QR codes and stuff like that in the village, in the Cultural Village, to actually just enhance the Kingsburg experience. So if that answers your question. But we do appreciate what the city has always done for the festival in money, manpower, and support. So. Anything else of me? I'll sit down.
Nope. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Any comments from the public on this agenda item? No? Okay, back to council.
I think we should do more, and we should do it ongoing, so they don't have to come back every year.
Appreciate that. I think a little bit of the risk, though, is, last year we funded the fireworks additionally. Now we're funding this additionally. Once we start down that road, there's never enough money for all of this stuff. So at some point, we have to pull the reins on individual items. I'm not proposing we pull it on this one. I like this one, but it is a slope. It is a slope. So I'm all for the 5,000 ask, and then we'll see how the enhancements go, and then I'm all for evaluating it, and then you guys can propose something next year, and then we'll go from there. But the 5,000, I'm good with.
If I can comment, Steve has done a great job with our fundraising. We've got businesses that support the Swedish Festival, and it's wonderful to see people step up and do that. And the Swedish Festival, we can financially, we'll have the Swedish Festival. The thought here, though, with this is to enhance it. A lot of times we can't plan. We don't know how much money to plan for. So we can't plan on a whole lot of enhancements until we start getting money in, and then it comes in at the last hour. So that's the thing. We have a list, and we've got some great ideas. And then next year, hopefully, we'll have some more great ideas to enhance it, and we'll consider coming back, representing if we're going to do this again, and maybe we'll do it a little earlier so that we have more time to pull some stuff off.
Yeah, I think 5,000 is good for this year, and I'm sure they'll come back next year, Laura, and we'll give them more. I'm sure things are going to go well, and if they ask for more, I'm sure we'll have no problem with that also. So this is an action item. I need to get a motion from somebody.
The motion would be, I think, to provide the $5,000 to the chamber to be earmarked for the Swedish Cultural Village.
Oh, it's to the chamber?
Yeah, I think that has to be. You have
Okay.
to have it to an entity.
Yeah, I was looking for verbiage on that here. Okay. And that'll be the motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on, agenda item, regular calendar number 7. 2024-2025 water rate study update. Staff report by Public Works Director Daniel Galvez.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Staff's here today to provide an update to the 2024-2025 water rate study update. The contract for that study was given to Lehovich and Sang, municipal consultants. If their name sounds a little bit familiar, they are the same firm that we utilize for our Prop 218 and water rate rate study for our solid waste, which we passed a few years back. So staff is here to provide an update. The update includes the following: a detailed cost of service analysis, a determination of current and future revenue needed to provide water services, an assessment of the existing customer service fee structure, options for changes to the rate structure such as meter fees, conservation fees, bulk water usage, etc., and requirements of communication to comply with Prop 218, which is required to implement any water rate increases. So we do have Allison that has a presentation for you guys. There will be 3 options. Of those 3 options, staff does believe that option 3, which does issue some debt, she'll be able to provide some additional information on that option. But we do feel that it is not necessary at this time. We did present these options to the Finance Committee, and they did not request any changes. And then just for reference, the last water rate increase did occur in 2019. And some additional information. Since 2019, the operations in our water system has completely changed. In 2019, we did not chlorinate water. We didn't have any GAC tanks. There was also some reporting that was not required. And so the operations and the maintenance of the water system has significantly changed from 2019 into where we stand now at 2025. So with that, I'll pass it over to Allison, who will go with her presentation, and then after we'll be available for questions.
Good evening. I'm sharing my screen. Just a moment while I get that going. So I hope my presentation is up on the screen. Daniel gave a lot of background about the water 2019. Your current rate structure includes a base fee of about $32, which includes the first 11,000 gallons of water use. So customers only pay a volume rate for any usage above 11,000 gallons. And we are proposing to adjust that rate structure. Requirements under Proposition 218, which is the legal governing statute for utility rates, heavily emphasize that rates have to be proportional to service. So under your current rate structure, a customer uses only maybe 1,000 gallons of water, and a customer that uses 10,000 gallons of water all pay that same base fee of $32.25. So we want to update the rate structure to be more in line with industry standard practice, more in line with legal requirements, and is more fair and equitable to how folks use the water system. Also, all customers, all different sizes, pay that base fee. So we are recommending a scaled up base fee based on meter size. So your very large customers with extremely large meters are paying for their fair share of the capacity in your water system that they're taking out. So your water utility is an enterprise fund, same as the solid waste utility that we worked on a few years ago. The water fund is intended to be fully financially self-supported, and the number one revenue is rate revenue paid by customers. Our rate study is a 5-year rate plan. 5 years is the maximum planning horizon allowed under Proposition 218. So the proposal is that new rates go into effect at the start of the fiscal year on July 1st, and then the rate plan be adjusted each year over the next 5 years on the July 1st schedule. So our number one goal of rate study is to cover costs. We have to make sure that the water utility is funding operating costs, debt repayment, some existing debt on the water system, so we need to continue to pay that off. Fund needed capital improvement projects. We need to make sure the water system is being repaired and renewed to continue to provide safe and reliable service, and to make sure the water utility has appropriate reserves. Your reserves in the water fund are a little low now. I want to make sure that you always have enough revenue to fund any emergency expenses as they may arise. So I hit on some of this already. The rates, like I said, are intended to be fair and reasonable based on actual costs, as well as be proportional to how customers take service. So that's some of those rate design changes that I mentioned. We also have a number of procedural requirements, and these are the same as the solid waste rate study. So we'll conduct our survey, or our study, to demonstrate the cost of service. We'll mail a notice to all property owners and ratepayers explaining the need for the rate increase and notifying them of a public hearing. And then the city can hold a public hearing minimum of 45 days later. Rates are adopted via protest process. So if more than 50% of affected ratepayers write a written protest, the city cannot adopt the rates. But absent majority protest, city council does have the option to adopt up to the rate shown in the Proposition 218 notice. So we always calculate the rate as like a worst case scenario, and city council always has the opportunity to adopt a lower rate than what we've noticed or what we've included in the rate study if you choose. So if the financials are better than expected, if you get a grant for a project that we assumed would be rate funded, city council can go to a lower rate. You just can't go higher than what we include in the notice. So some new information since we did the solid waste rate study. On January 1st, there was a new law passed describing the exhaustion of administrative remedies. So in our Prop 218 notice, we can include some information advising customers of their right to submit a written objection. It has to be very, very detailed, and it's only for any customers that think the city did something illegal with the rate plan. And the idea is that that would forestall future lawsuits. So any potential legal challenges could be addressed before the rates are ever adopted. and failure to submit a written objection helps forestall future lawsuits. It was a little bit complicated, but I have some information about that I can review with your city attorney as we move through the Proposition 218 process. Okay, so this is the current financial standing of the water utility. So you're generating about $2.5 million in rate revenues, or revenues including rates and a little bit of like interest earnings and penalties. And that $2.5 million is being used on operations, electricity to pump water, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, regulatory costs, and existing debt service. So right now, based on your budget for this fiscal year, it looks like the water fund is slightly in a deficit. So revenues are not quite covering all the expenses. So I'm showing slight negative, a negative of about $200,000. So to fund that, the city will draw from reserves. Current reserves are about $1.2 million. So there's a need to course correct here. We want the rate revenues to first cover operations, cover debt service, and then on top of that, we have capital projects. And also on top of that, there's always just a little bit of inflation. The cost of electricity to pump the water is going up. Services and supplies just to run the water system are going up. So all of that is wrapped into the cost of service that we need to recover from customers. And wanted to emphasize again that the rates have not been increased in 5 years. So that probably explains why there's this misalignment between revenues and expenses, where expenses probably increased year over year over year, probably especially during the COVID-19 kind of supply chain issue situation we all had going on, whereas revenues have remained at the same amount. So this chart shows the capital improvement projects. We worked very closely with city staff to refine this list. We have Well 17, Sigma recharge projects, water pipeline projects, valves, and other large maintenance. Sometimes in rate studies, if there's like one particular project in a single year, I'll recommend, hey, why don't we debt finance that? It'll help smooth out your cash flow. That is not the case for your city. We don't have one particular project, that's really spiking the cash flow here. You really have a lot of ongoing kind of deferred maintenance type projects that are really suited to those rate increases, funding those types of things. It's year over year, kind of large maintenance replacement kind of projects that really are best suited for rate revenue funding. Okay, so this chart, we'll spend a little time here, explains a few rate increase options. The first two have no new debt, and then that third one, just to give you a range, we did include one debt financing option. I believe that's like the lowest preferred option. So the first option has a revenue increase of 15%, followed by 30%, 20%, and then 4%, 4%. So that's those percentages, and then the slash, and then the next percent. That's year over year proposed rate increases over the 5-year rate length. So some of the options phase rates in more upfront, and some of them phase in rate adjustments more gradually. I intentionally left the first rate increase as lower in all three options, and that is because we are proposing some pretty significant rate structure changes. So people are going to need some time to get used to all these different ways we're proposing to recover the cost of service. So we are proposing that 11,000 gallons of included water be phased out. So people are going to be billed for each unit of water. Some people are going to need some time to adjust to all that. So not every customer is going to get exactly the percent rate adjustments shown here, but this is more of overall the amount of revenue your utility needs to recover. And then the third column there is a cumulative increase over 5 years. So once we do year over year over year over year, total revenue change. So looking over the full 5 years, Option 1 is a total revenue increase of about 93%. Option 2 is more than doubling the rate at 107%. And then option 3 is almost doubling the rate at 99%. But all of these options end the 5th year in a good financial place. We've funded a lot of capital under these options. We're funding all their operating costs. And then each option is accumulating about a little over a $2 million reserve. And that's appropriate given your level of like operating costs, capital costs, and debt service costs each year. That's a healthy reserve, but not excessive for your size of city. So I included a few cash flow charts for each option. So for option 1, I just want to illustrate the bars. The portion of the chart with the bars are expenses. The blue bars are operating expenses. On top of that, the orange bar is debt service. And then on top of that is capital, so improvement projects. And then the green line is the increase in revenue over the 5-year period. So you can see the first couple of years, revenues and expenses are not quite in line, but then the right-hand side of the chart, revenues are above expenses, meaning we're fully covering costs and also adding to your reserve funds. We're generating a little bit positive net revenues, and that is illustrated in the dotted black line. So the dotted black line is the reserve. So that's the cash you have in the bank account for your water utility. So the first few years it's drawing down slightly as we phase in those rate increases, and then it's going up in the right-hand side of the chart, indicating that we're generating positive net revenues we're adding to the bank account. This is option 2, so it's laid out the same way, where the bars are illustrating the capital projects, operating costs, and debt service, and then the green line is the revenue. So it's increasing revenue at a different rate than option 1. And then option 3 was an option where, just to illustrate what a debt issuance might look like, we have a proposed debt issuance of $2 million in the second year of the rate plan. That adds to your fund balance, and then you spend it down on capital projects over time. But all new debt issuances come with that new debt service cost. And so you can see that's so the yellow bar is existing debt service, and then the orange bar is new debt service that the city would have to pay. I assumed a 20-year payback period. Okay, so on top of increasing the total cost of service for the water utility, we also propose rate structure changes, rate design changes. So adjusting how customers pay for service. We are proposing that the 11,000 gallons that's currently included in the base fee be eliminated, and that all water usage be billed a volume rate. So whether you use 1,000 gallons or 50,000 gallons, every 1,000 gallons you're paying a fee for that water. And so it more fairly recovers costs based on how much people are using. So the volume rate is the same for all options. It's calculated as the cost to deliver water to customers. So it's the cost to pump that water, move it to customers, transport it through your system, the maintenance, and a portion of staffing and engineering, and proposed to increase by 4% annually. The base fees, so that's a fee that you pay, it's a fixed fee, whether you use water or not, it's a fixed fee for being connected to the water system, is proposed to be scaled based on meter size. And the scaling, so the ratio of a small meter to a big meter is based on capacity, so how much water can flow through that meter. And that's intended to recover the fixed cost of the system, that the system is available to deliver water to you 24 hours a day, whether you turn on the tap or not. So this first draft has fees for 1-inch meters, 2-inch meters, and 4-inch meters. I understand the city does have some potential customers using 3-inch meters, so I will go ahead and add the 3-inch meter rate when we finalize the study. Okay. So here is option 1. So the current base fee for all types of customers is $32.25, and the first proposed change is a little bit of a decrease for most customers. So most customers are 1-inch customers or smaller. So the base fee is decreasing slightly from $32.25 to $31.53, and then slowly ramping up as we apply additional rate increases over the 5 years. The larger meter sizes are scaled based on that meter ratio, which is the maximum capacity of the meter. And then you also see in the chart here the current rate structure has tiers for usage over the 11,000 gallons, and we are proposing to increase that volume rate. So it's proposed that all usage be billed, and the first rate would be $1.23 per 1,000 gallons of use. So here are some example bills under option 1. I have a low user bill that's like a typical wintertime bill, an average user bill that reflects the average over all 12 months of the year is 16,000 gallons. Then a high user bill is like the hottest summer period bill, the highest use type, typical high summer usage type bill. And so we are seeing a range of impacts, and that is heavily due because of the rate structure design choices that we made. And the rate change does impact customers differently based on how much water they're using. 10.2, similar rate structure, so all the options have the same volume rate, proposed volume rate, and then the different options have slightly different fixed charges because we're phasing in some of those funding situations a little differently under the different options. And so this one does also have a very slight decrease to that 1-inch rate, but then it increases over time, and then we're also having larger meter fees as well. So this option phases in the rate structure changes, and the bills get phased in a little more gradually than option 1. And we have a range of rate impacts, again, based on water usage. This is option 3. This option also had a slight decrease to that 1-inch rate for that first July 1st rate adjustment, and then increase over time. And then here's the same set of bills: a low user, winter bill, average user, and then high user, summer bill. Okay, so we are proposing rate adjustments. However, I wanted to again emphasize that the city has not raised rates in 5 years, and I have a series of charts here that compare the city of Kingsburg's typical bill under the current rates with the proposed bills under the different options, also compared with your neighbors, all the other water utilities in your area. So a typical kind of winter bill for a single family customer is 8,000 gallons of use. Your current bill is $32.25. And with the proposed rate adjustments, the proposed bill would be like $39 to $41, depending on the options. And it's very, very comparable to like Fresno. Your bill would stay in the middle of the pack for that typical winter bill. So even though it's a rate increase, your bills are very, very comparable to other typical water agencies, water utilities in your area. So here's the bill based on 16,000 gallons of usage. So your current bill at 16,000 gallons of usage is one of the lowest in the region. And then with the proposed increase to about $49 to $51, you're still in the middle of the group there. So definitely nowhere near the expensive side of the chart. And then this is the typical bill for that summer period. Your bill was the lowest of these agencies that we surveyed. And then the typical bill would increase from $43 to about $59 to $61. And again, be kind of right in the middle of the comparable agencies. So Nobody likes a rate increase, but it is necessary to correct the deficit for your water utility, to fund those capital improvements, to continue to have safe, reliable water service, to fund SGMA costs, and then to better reflect legal requirements and industry best practices for rate design. So there were a few other items that we started to investigate. As part of this rate plan, we also proposed will include a schedule of drought rates. So during a water shortage emergency, City Council would have this tool, drought rates, to help recover your cost of service, even in declining water sales. And those drought rates will be Proposition 218 adopted fees that will be cost of service based. On top of that, the city can always assess penalty fees for like extreme water wasters. One other option could be also implementing irrigation meter fees. Commercial customers typically have dedicated irrigation lines that provide outdoor water use rather than indoor domestic use, and we can do a two-tiered structure of fees for those. It makes your rate structure a little more complicated, but we wanted to offer that as a policy consideration. Another consideration would be private fire lines. Cities do offer private fire line rates. My understanding is your city does not have a good inventory of the number of customers or the sizes of fire lines, so that would probably be a pretty difficult effort to aggregate that data, but we wanted to just offer that as a potential policy discussion. You also have inside versus outside city rates, where outside city customers pay a higher rate. That differential in cost really isn't cost of service based under Proposition 218, so I recommend that you phase that out. Okay, so giving you a lot of information. The goal tonight is to address any policy concerns, address any questions, and then to get some guidance on a preferred rate option. I will then incorporate that into a narrative rate study report and then present that to City Council in a month. And then shortly thereafter, the city can print and mail the notice of hearings, conduct ratepayer outreach if desired, and then hold the Proposition 218 hearing in June to then implement new rates July 1st. So the rate will go into effect July 1st and apply to July water use, and then it will appear on the bill that folks receive in August. All right. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I realize I've thrown a lot of information at you.
Questions from council?
And maybe this one's for Daniel, but the businesses in town, just the small businesses here on Draper Street, would they be on a 1-inch line or
So
a 2-inch?
the majority of our connections are 1-inch connections, but we do have, I think, approximately about 141 2-inch meter connections, and we do have one residential 2-inch connection, one 4-inch connection, and then we do have a 3-inch water line, which is the one that Caltrans is putting in for the rest stop. So that one's not reflected in this rate study yet, but will be in the final study.
So there's a homeowner that has a 2-inch line.
One, yep.
Do they need a 2-inch line?
So I think that's one thing that we need to kind of work out with them, because it's not a new installation, so it's just determining whether they even need a meter that size. So.
Okay. Also, in the finance, we discussed this in the finance committee meeting this last week. There was some discussion about apartments and how they were going to be billed.
Correct. So in 2014, correct, Alex, that's when the city did a major water project where they did borrow some money to install water meters in the majority of residents that did not have one when they were constructed. When that project commenced and when it was completed, for some reason or another, the staff at the current time did not include multifamilies. So currently they are being billed a flat rate per unit. So for example, if you have 4 units, they get the flat rate, which is like 34 and some change. They multiply it by 4, so they're not being billed for their actual usage. We are looking into implementing a project similar to what we did in 2014 to get meters installed in those locations. So with those, it becomes a little tricky and will require us to work with the property owners to determine how they want those set up, whether they want 1 meter or whether they want to individual meter or valve the individual buildings. So there's a couple different options of how those can be proposed, but it will allow them to actually be billed based on their water usage and not just on a flat rate.
So how will they be billed under this new structure until that's
So there is
resolved?
a flat rate that they will continue to be billed at. It is at a little bit higher rate than what is currently being charged, but the goal in that is to encourage them to get metered.
Okay. Do we have many residents that aren't on a meter?
We do have a few left. If we're looking at residential, we're probably around 93 to 95% metered. So there's very few homes left that don't have meters.
Okay. Lastly, you mentioned the one resident with a 2-inch line. Before this goes out and they receive a very large bill, you'll be talking, somebody will be contacting them?
Yeah, so
they're-
when that did get brought up at the Finance Committee meeting, we did do a little more research to ensure that there wasn't a ton of these 2-inch residential meters. And like I said, based on our records, we did find one. Currently, they're not being billed any higher than what a 1-inch meter is being billed. So we also just want to verify the size of that meter and make sure that in our records, it says 2-inch, but we actually want to go out and make sure there's an actual 2-inch meter there and it's not just a 1-inch. That's a typo. Like I said, right now, there's no financial consequences for it, but if this rate study does get implemented, there would be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
More questions from council? Dave?
No, I'm good.
I have a question, Daniel. Chlorinating the water, is that permanent?
That is permanent, so it is required based on the amount of connections that we have and also on the operations of our system. Because we have the TCP at 2 of our well sites where we do have GAC, which is the granular activated carbon, part of that process does require chlorination. And so that is going to be a permanent process of what we do operation-wise. So it is going to continue.
Okay, thank you. And then our rates haven't gone up since 2019?
Correct.
And before that, it was how many years?
The council did a Prop 218 in 20, I think the first year was 2014, I think it was the first year I was here. Then there was a delay, I think, of 1 year. If some of you were, I think, on the council at the time, the state came down with reductions, and so the council, because the community responded, I think we actually reduced our usage overall by about 40% that summer. The council delayed the final increase 1 year, and so that I think it went into effect in 2019 when the final one went into place. So prior to that Prop 218, I don't know what it was before that, but so these are five-year programs. We had a similar conversation when we talked about the solid waste rates, that I think it's the council's preference now to stay on a consistent 5-year schedule so that we don't get into these positions where we have, large gaps of time between rate increases, so that the rates can be, they're going to, in most cases, they're going to continue to go up, but then they're a much more palatable increase as opposed to these larger ones when we're playing a little bit of catch up, which is what we experience with the solid waste rates as well.
Thank you, Alice. I think one other thing to just kind of note, Allison did mention that the proposed rates would be the maximum rates. That doesn't mean that you guys, when we come and present the master fee schedule next year, that it can't be lower. So for example, for the solid waste study, we did approve up to 10% increases year over year. And I think over the last couple of years, we've only done 5.5. So the maximum amount that was presented we haven't raised them that high based on the performance of the fund and the operations of what we're doing. So.
Another question I have is on current financial standings, the ongoing expenses. Sigma cost is $581. Correct. Now, is that for recharge, or is that for water? Paying for water, or is that for recharge projects?
Both.
Both. Okay. And then I see here capital improvement costs. The recharge projects are $200,000, 26, 225, so it comes out to $1,250,000. That's just Kingsburg, or because we're in
that is
with
just
South
our,
Kings.
That's
just
just our
Kingsburg.
portion, yeah.
So how does that compare to the other cities in the South Kings GSA?
I don't have that data. I don't know if you.
So the actual recharge projects, the amounts that are there they're placeholders. So those aren't necessarily designated amounts. So as Daniel just mentioned, I think you could look at this two ways. You can build those in and assume that there's going to be some cost there over time, and that might be that could be one project that's 1.2 million as opposed to 5 years of a smaller amount. But if you don't plan for it, you look the same thing with the other large maintenance items. That's not, maybe nothing will happen, but if there's an emergency or something like that, we need the funding. That's what it's built in for. But it's also, when we look at it from year to year, if there's not, if we have a fund balance that will support that without, some of those larger capital items, then we'll factor that into the proposed rate increase for that year. So, you're building on some assumptions both on expenditures, in capital, but also in O&M. As it relates to the other communities, we pay a portion, when it relates to Sigma, our portion is based upon our pumping amounts. So our percentage that we have to pay is based upon the amount of water that we pump in Kingsburg. So you take all the communities, add up what the total pumping is, there's a percentage based. So if we pump less, our amount to the GSA will be less, right? So if we use less water overall, our amount that we'll have to pay in will be less. It just differs by community based upon, obviously the larger communities pay in more because there's more of them and so they pump more water. But the GSA itself obviously has its own mechanism for paying for capital projects when it comes to recharge. We just have to consider a portion that we're putting in each year. That makes sense.
Okay, that's my. How about we're paying for water from Consolidated, right?
That's part of the Sigma costs.
Yeah, that's part of the Sigma cost. And has our cost increased substantially since we started the South Kings GSA, or is it, I'm just curious, is it the same? Is it before we started South Kings?
So we used to have a cooperative agreement with CID. The amounts, as soon as we entered into Sigma with them, those amounts increased at that time. We negotiated an acre-foot amount, and then there is a CPI increase each year.
So we used to have a different agreement with them until we,
Prior
Okay.
to Sigma going into.
and then prior to us starting the South Kings, getting into the South King, okay.
Correct.
That's what I thought, okay. All righty, that's what I wanted to know.
The other option was the one with Selma, right, at that time?
What's
And
that?
The other option at that time was to do it Selma.
No, Salma was gonna be in the South Kings. They pulled out.
And I noticed they were higher than us on all those.
Yeah, their water system's totally different than ours, yeah. Then,
Can I ask one
yeah,
more question?
sure.
You mentioned that there's 141
2-inch.
2-inch connections. Will those companies, because I'm assuming they're all businesses, are those businesses aware? I mean, their first bill is going to go up $70 just in a base charge. Will they be notified that they're 2-inch outside of the Prop 218? Will they also?
So I think that's something that we can put, I'm starting to kind of understand that this is a big concern regarding some of the businesses. And that is something that we can put in the notice to say, you know, if you're unsure of your meter size, to contact us. Just because, like I said, right now, the way that our billing structure is set up, it's not identified as a 1-inch meter and here's the charge. It's just the base rate because everybody pays the same regardless of the meter size now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any public comment or questions from the public on this agenda item? No, hearing none. Bring it back to council. Any more comments or questions?
I just have comments more than
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
Pro Tem Palomar. So this is an interesting one for me because, you know, as most of you know, I farm also. So the irrigation districts and the groundwater sustainability agencies, the groundwater sustainability plans are all kind of grappling with this topic. It's a hot topic, not only for municipalities, but for, you know, private sector businesses in the whole entire valley. And so it's a tough one, but I will tell you that with my experience in going to some of those meetings, this is going to be an ongoing thing with groundwater sustainability agencies, which are GSAs, known as GSAs. And even outside of here, rates are looking to increase, not just for municipalities. Everybody is literally trying to figure out how we are going to stay sustainable without more infrastructure to capture water, when populations are growing, when there's demand for more food products, which is demand for more water. So it's an important topic. It's not always palatable to pay more, but water is the lifeblood. And when you look at what the rates are and you figure it out on a gallon basis, it's really super inexpensive, even with the rate increases. And I'm not for rate increases, but in order for us to stay sustainable, in order for us to stay viable as a community, we need water. And if you're gonna use it, if I'm gonna use it, I get to pay for it. And the more I use, the more I should probably pay. And that goes with farming, that goes with, inside my own home. And so, just a few comments for context outside of city, because I think it's important that everybody understand, the whole big picture. I don't want to pay more for rates. I don't want to pay more, but I understand that I'm going to have to. And it's just the reality on the grower side, and it's the reality, unfortunately, on the city side that we live in. So I appreciate the presentation. I think it has a lot of good, useful information that people can understand. And you may not like it, but you can understand it, and you can draw your own conclusions. So with that, thank you, Daniel, and thank you to the presenter. I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions? So staff's just looking for direction. Do we need to make a motion on anything?
I think we'd like to know if there, there are three options. The Finance Committee expressed this at the Finance Committee. I think our preference is option one of the three. The rates are the least expensive. I think there's a little bit of there's a higher initial increase, but if you look at year 5, the rates are lower than option number 2. And it also gives us a little bit of a higher fund balance, which I think when we come back in 5 years and we're having to have a rate study discussion again, if there's a higher fund balance, then I think the proposed rates will potentially be lower based upon that. If there's any direction tonight on that, we'd appreciate that. If there is any additional information that the council is seeking based upon the presentation that was given tonight, so that either staff or the consultant can go back and provide that. Any direction or input that council has, we're happy to receive.
Okay. So that being said, so Finance Committee, Alex, you said recommended option 1? Stacy, okay, you were there, Stacy, yeah. Yeah, that's the one I liked because it ends in the lowest rate, for citizens, but you guys know where I stand on this from a long time ago joining South Kings instead of staying where we were, but yeah, so I like option 1.
I like the fact that that even though it's the highest rate, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to get to the highest rate. And I think that you guys have proven to make sure that we're not gouging citizens on items, right? So that's the fear is like, oh, they're going to raise my rates. Well, not necessarily. This is a ceiling that could potentially be lower. And so I think that's important. So I'm not interested in going into debt unless we had to, right, Daniel? So I guess that might be a question. If we need more infrastructure now, which you don't have more infrastructure, you have a well in 29. But what happens in the event that a well goes down? Should we do option 3 so we have funds available in case a well goes down and we need well 17 prior to 2019 or 29? Excuse me.
So I think one way to view this is the ending fund balance. So we do have some cash reserves. The American Public Works Association does have some guidelines in terms of how much of those reserves we should have. And Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is 6 months of operating expenses.
So 6 months of operating expenses, 1 year of debt service payments, and then on top of that, it's a little bit of a policy choice, but I always recommend agencies have the cost of an emergency repair. So either a pipeline break or replacing a pump on a well, something like that. So you cash for that emergency repair on top of all those other items I mentioned.
So when you look at the capital improvements that were listed in the presentation, when we initially started the process, I think we had like $13 million worth of improvements, and as we honestly, it was probably the thing that took the longest of us figuring out what those improvements were going to cost, and then we further refined those down of like what's actually feasible for us to get done in the next 5 years. And some of them, when we did our water model study, we saw, hey, there's repairs that need to happen. We need to conjoin those with road repairs. Some of those we got done when we did, 15th, 16th, and 17th Avenue. But we have those opportunities to look at them and say, hey, in the next 5 years, this is what we're thinking that we can do. For example, the new well site, even though we have new construction, even though there's some usage, there is conservation that's happening depending on whether it's a dry year or a wet year. You can see the amount of water that's being produced and being utilized. One of the other opportunities, for example, taking back to solid waste, is we anticipated having a high procurement cost. Cal Recycle ended up providing grants to cover the majority of those procurement costs so far. So we haven't had to incur those out of that fund. We've had grant funds to take care of those procurement costs for composting. So there may be additional opportunities that come forward regarding some of these projects. where we may be able to find a grant or an alternate funding source to help us take care of that. So.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, I concur with the finance committee, and option one seems like it's the best option.
Does that give staff direction?
Yes, if there's no additional information that the council wants us to provide, I think we'll finalize, we'll plan to finalize the report and then bring that back, per Allison's timeline, which is the March 19th council meeting. So that final report will come back for consideration by the council and approval at that time.
Okay. Sounds good.
I appreciate the efforts, though, to communicate with the public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. She's still there. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Allison. Item number 8, Space Needs Assessment Proposal, Staff Report by Assistant City Manager Christina Windover.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Palomar and Council. I'm bringing back an item that we've previously discussed, I think in December, regarding a City Hall Space Needs Assessment. Just for some background, we requested RFPs for a space needs assessment earlier this year. We received several responses and narrowed down our recommendations through the Finance Committee. And ultimately, City Council advised staff to move forward with Griffin Structures. We were able to narrow the scope of our proposal from Griffin Structures by 12%. So ultimately, that proposal ended up being around $109,000, $109,500. Essentially, when we discussed the Griffin proposal, there were questions by council about really the need for the assessment and kind of like the scope of everything. So shortly after our December meeting, we were contacted by another agency and given a referral for another company, a firm that does space needs assessments called Integrated Designs by Soman Incorporated. Staff has met with Soman and their staff and discussed our proposed scope of work and just kind of discussed the needs of City Hall and the future of City Hall. So included in your packet is the original proposal with Griffin that we discussed back in December, but then there's a new proposal from Integrated Designs. The Integrated Designs proposal has 3 phases of work. We're really only discussing tonight the first phase of that proposal, which is the assessment and conceptual design. The pricing is based on whether the city wants our own unique design concept or if we would like to use an existing design concept that they've used. The other phases would be more related to construction, plan bidding, and construction administration. So those costs aren't included in the proposal. However, as it was pointed out when we previously discussed the space needs assessment, right now we may just be looking for a conceptual design. So this might better fit the needs of what we're looking for. So the 2 proposals, one is $45,000, and that would be looking at an existing design that they already have and kind of them proposing it for Kingsburg City Hall. And their second proposal option would be $60,000 for a brand new City Hall conceptual design. So Just to summarize, ultimately, the integrated design proposal, the scope is more limited than the Griffin structured proposal. Like I said, staff originally sought direction from the Finance Committee to reduce the scope proposed previously by Griffin, but it was still, it still exceeded the amount that we had budgeted for the space needs assessment. Currently in the budget, we have $75,000 budgeted for space needs assessment. And like I mentioned, the Griffin structures was $109,500. And then there's the two options presented by the new proposal with integrated designs. So I've included both of those proposals in your packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Ultimately, staff is wanting to seek direction from council on whether or not they'd like to go with Griffin structures, or if they think the new proposal from integrated designs is a better match for the city of Kingsburg. And like I said, the proposals are included in your packet, and there's a sample of some of the work that they've done for the city of Reedley, and there's also work product for Griffin for some of the work that they've done. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
I have a question, Christina. So the integrated designs on the assessment, they'll still meet with staff and see their individual needs?
Correct. They'll meet with staff. There are, they've kind of listed out some of the items that staff would need to provide for them in order to give us a complete and thorough conceptual design. But we would have several meetings with them throughout that process. I would say maybe one of the bigger differences is there's not that same community outreach in the proposal. That would be our responsibility.
And Griffin, the price that they're, the 109, is it include, because I know the other one doesn't include the 60, or the 40 is only for phase 1. It doesn't include phase 2 and phase 3. Does Griffin give us all of that, or is it still?
No, it's still a conceptual design. Okay. When I mentioned it's a more limited scope, I was primarily referring to like the community outreach portion of the proposal.
Any other questions or comments from council? Do we have any comments or questions from the public on this agenda item? Nope. Okay, it's back to us. Well, I like integrated. The work they did here for Reedley looks good, you know. So I think for $60,000 for what is it called? Integrated? No, conceptual design, and that just doesn't include, and that's in budget too, right? You said the budget's $75,000.
Yes.
Yeah. We just have to do our own public outreach, which we've done in the past for, you know, several things. So I think we can handle that.
Yes, staff is confident that we can handle public outreach. And we'd be happy to take suggestions from council if they had any recommendations on how we conduct that as well.
The staff, on staff direction, which one do you prefer? The new unique design or utilizing a previous design, the new unique?
I think our preference would be to authorize up to that amount. Most of our discussions with them have been sort of around the Reedley design, which was modeled after a similar building there. So they may have other existing designs that we would consider. We just haven't gotten that far with them, so we wanted to have this conversation with the Finance Committee and ultimately the council before we went to that point. So I think if council is comfortable with up to that amount and then allowing us to make a decision on that based upon further discussion with them, that would be our preference.
And staff is comfortable going with integrated designs, or do you have a preference?
Christina and Daniel and I met with them. I think they, they came with good references from the city of Reedley. I think what they're offering is similar to Griffin. I think Griffin would do a nice job, but when the difference is $50,000, I don't know that the difference is that much. So I think when we were presented with this option, felt it was probably prudent to bring it to the group just for consideration. So we feel comfortable.
I appreciate you going the extra mile, finding additional options within the budget. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Okay, so do you need, let me see, do you need a motion or just direction, Alex?
I prefer a motion.
I'll make a motion to go with the integrated designs and giving staff the option up to the $60,000 proposal.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have on our agenda, future agenda items, which we have none. City manager's report.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay. Next, we have council reports and council committee reports. Councilmember Silva, start with you.
The Economic Development Committee has not met, nor has the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control. I will tell you that the South Kings GSA is planning on meeting March 12th, and I did attend the Kingsburg Healthcare District meeting, and thank you to Chief Rodney Roberts for giving a presentation on the ambulance and fire on behalf of the city. Thank you for that presentation. And in addition, thank you to Adam for bringing Seniors Inc. Into the conversation on the breakfast, the breakfast that they do 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's very popular, and the Kingsburg Healthcare District is very supportive. So Adam gave a great presentation on that as well, and then Chamber. Then I filled in for Councilmember North at the Chamber of Commerce meeting. Very robust meeting, I must say. They have a lot of activity going on coming into the first of the year, which is exciting. A lot of committees and a lot of action, a lot of events coming, car show, annual dinner, Swedish festival, all great events. I think that the energy is really good at the chamber. They're excited. I also attended the car show committee meeting with Chairman Adrian Perez, and that was good. They're still looking for volunteers. So if I can just give, the city my take on, all these events. They're so great, and the city does such a great job. Chamber does such a great job, but it's only great because of the volunteers and the people that help make all of these events go, and they can always use more help. So if I could ask anything of the constituents, residents, be a part of it if you can, because it is super fun and they are super great events. And people come from all over. It was interesting because when I helped with the car show 2 years ago, a gentleman recognized me from Chowchilla, of all places, and he enters his car every year, and he's from Chowchilla, and I'm like, wow, that's something. So just a really good meeting, and thank you, Councilmember North, for allowing me to sit in on that, and I appreciate it. And thank you to the Chamber also, because I think they're doing, in addition to the bid, I think they're both, working cohesively, and these festivals and events are going to go off really, really well. So that's all I had to report.
Thank you, Dave. Councilmember Norton.
I reported last time on bid, and we meet again on March 4th. Chamber of Commerce is March 11th, and for Center Point, we're quarterly, so we haven't met since our last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Yes, the Finance Committee, we're scheduled to meet on February 24th, and Community Services is 2 days later on February 26th. Two things I'd like to mention is I attended the task force meeting. I really appreciate, it's one of the unique things about Kingsburg that that's possible to have all these people coming together from different arenas. And I'd like to say thank you. There's so many city employees. The city's very well represented there. And I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule to attend that. I think it's fruitful for all the different individuals and businesses and organizations that come together. I appreciate that. And lastly, I'd like to say thank you to the council. I enjoy the Swedish Festival. I enjoy being on the committee. But I appreciate you guys supporting us and providing us with those funds. And thank you for what you said about volunteers. We can always use volunteers because we couldn't pull it off without a lot of help. So thank you guys.
Thank you for all your hard work on that during this festival, Stacy. Okay, let me see myself. Public Safety Committee, we met last week, and the committee voted to allocate $5,000. The police department, elementary school, they are going to have they have safety day, and with the $5,000, they're going to buy helmets, bike helmets, because a lot of kids driving around Kingsburg on their scooters and their e-bikes with no helmets. So the police department wants to buy, I think it's like 100 or more helmets. 200, yeah, thank you, 200, Laura. And they're also wanting to have safety, they're going to buy some safety pamphlets to pass out to the kids during their, each elementary school has their own safety day. Right, Laura? And so they said that $5,000 is really going to help them out with that. So we were happy to do that for the Public Safety Committee. And then SKF, we met today, and we approved the 2024 Collection System Master Plan Update, which Pat was also involved with that and helped get that on our agenda. We also approved a 2-year contract with DePuja and Wells for sewer system master plan engineering services, which is going to cost, what does it say here, $35,000 for that engineering service. And then we also voted to accept a budget amendment authorizing Electric Motor Shop to install the North Street panel. I believe the North Street is what? That's Selma, right, Alex? Or is it Fowler? I know you guys talked
It's not
about that in
Kingsburg.
Pat. Anyways, North Street panel. And Planning Commission is scheduled to meet on May 13th. And that's all I have. Let me see, next on our agenda is adjourn the meeting. So we finally don't have closed session tonight. We've had a lot of those lately. So with that, I'll adjourn tonight's city council meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Vince.
Yeah, thank you.